how we are feeling influences how we are thinking. There are times when ideas are flowing and flowing and flowing, and you are feeling positive and you're feeling energized. And when you are in these kinds of moods, you can very quickly come up with ideas. But at other times, ideas are not coming and everything seems stupid, right? Well, it turns out that those kinds of feelings are also useful. They're just not useful for coming up with ideas. They are very useful for critical thinking. And if we take creative work as not just coming up with ideas, but also developing them, making them into best products we possibly can, then you see how this could be helpful.
That's Dr. Zorana Pringle. She's a scientist at Yale who has spent over 25 years researching the field of creativity. Her work has been widely published, and she recently released her first book, The Creativity Choice, The Science of Making Decisions to Turn Ideas into Action. So you'll learn 1, how to feel more confident when taking risks, 2, how to make creative blocks work in your favor, and 3, how to get the most out of AI for work. And if you want to get a summary write-up of these actionable takeaways, I recommend you sign up for the free Gold Nugget email newsletter. That's found at awesomeatyourjob.com. I'm Pete Pais. This is How to Be Awesome at Your Job. And now, here's Zorana. Zorana, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so excited to dig into your wisdom and talk creativity. And I think it's important that we address right at the beginning, if professionals listening say, I'm not really in one of those really creative roles, what do you say to that? How does learning about creativity help every professional become more awesome at their jobs?
It helps a lot because creativity is not just for creative industries. It's not just for R&D. It's not just for artists. Creativity is really for everybody. And one of the favorite examples of creativity that I encountered in my consulting work was actually a supervisor in a food services unit of a large hospital. Now, do you expect it there?
Well, no, that doesn't sound like we're creating TV or or plays or anything in such a role.
No, but it was really influential because he has created a completely new workflow for his workers, and that really improved their health outcomes. They were not as stressed and frustrated in their work. It was easier. They did not have aches and pains from reaching for things, but also it made it safer for the patients they are serving because it was easier for the workers to do the job, and food is part of treatment. Everybody was winning in the process of something that this particular supervisor created.
That's nifty. So the creation was kind of rearranging where the stuff was in the process flow by which we move the food and the ingredients and the serving items?
Yeah, it was completely rearranging where things were, where the individual orders for tickets of what's supposed to come on a tray were, and where individual food items were placed.
Mm-hmm. Well, it feels like this could be a TV episode on HGTV or one of those restaurant turnaround situations. I could visualize how that could be transformational. And then maybe someone is crying toward the end because of the dramatic turnaround that has unfolded with this makeover.
It could be.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly make them more awesome at the job.
Beautiful. Well, I was just going to ask for an inspiring story, and that's a cool one. Can we have another?
Well, I think that really whatever you are doing, you can do something creative. I'm a scientist, and I oftentimes get the question, what is your creative outlet? With an assumption, well, creative outlet should be something artistic. But my creative outlet is my science and communicating about my science. We can use creativity in everyday life. I remember a couple of years ago, we had one of the really impossible seeming problems of how to arrange our summer travel. Our child was young. There were these constraints from my end, from my husband's end. And he completely transformed this seemingly impossible puzzle problem into something that was more interesting to deal with and that we approached in a different way when he said, hey, let's take this as a creative problem.
Mm-hmm.
What happened with this challenge is that our thinking changed from this is an impossible problem, this cannot be assembled into a coherent puzzle, into, well, how do we play with the pieces, move them around so that they end up snapping together?
Well, emotionally, that sounds a whole lot more fun and uplifting and edifying. But well, now we're in suspense. What was the ultimate solution here?
So, what happened was that because of different sets of travel for work for my husband and for myself, I ended up traveling with our son, who was young at the time, to Croatia, where I grew up, for him to see grandparents, stayed there for a week. Then my husband came, joined me there, and ended up staying there with the child while I ended up traveling for my own work purposes. So all was possible to do. And even in the meantime, my husband and I went on a just two of us trip together.
Oh, fantastic. Well done. And I really like what you had to say about the science being a creative outlet. I am the kind of dork who will read the full text of many scientific journal articles. And it's actually fun to peer inside the brains of the researcher. I was just reading one about a human randomized control trial about a yoga intervention. And so you could tell they were really racking their brains for what's the control here? Because there's consequences. Folks could feel disappointed if they're into yoga and they say, actually, you're in the control group. You're not doing any yoga. And that could skew the results one way. And so they were very clever. They said, okay, well, we're going to teach them about the history of yoga and some of the language and words and context and background, and then tell them that after the education, they'll get a chance to do the exercises. And that seemed to be as satisfactory as they could come up with. And there's some real creativity there.
Yes, certainly. There's lots of creativity in designing the studies, in coming up with questions and seeing how different pieces fit together, and in communicating that in coherent and persuasive ways.
So your book is called The Creativity Choice, The Science of Making Decisions to Turn Ideas into Action. What's the big idea here? What is the creativity choice?
There actually isn't the creativity choice. That is title that was little provocative, but there isn't one creativity choice. We start with a single choice, but then we have to make many more, because it is not as if, okay, you made one choice and now you are done. It is recommitting to the process of choosing creativity, choosing the challenging option, the original option that could produce something of interest and something truly awesome repeatedly.
So the A choice, or A key choice, from which many subsequent choices flow, is just that we are going to try to create something new and different here, as opposed to just kind of continue on going with the flow.
Exactly. So the first choice is the one, okay, you have an idea. Now you are deciding to do something with it. Oftentimes people have lots of ideas, but don't do anything with them, don't develop them, don't have performances or products that come out of them. It stays in the realm of imagination and fantasy. You meet over coffee with your best friend, you talk about your ideas, but it stays there. And we oftentimes ask the wrong question of how did you come up with that idea? Where really the more difficult question is, you had that idea, how did it happen? How did you take something that is just in your mind into something that is in the real world?
Well said. Absolutely. It's funny. I had the idea for Airbnb along with a friend, and then again with another friend, because we were in consulting or accounting, and seeing, hey, there's a lot of travel, a lot of empty bed time in this apartment. Maybe this should really turn into money somehow. This could really be a thing. But we proceeded to do nothing about it after I think we chatted with a Hyatt executive that we knew, and they said, oh man, that's a liability nightmare. Random people inside your house and vice versa. There's going to be crimes. There's going to be problems. It's going to say, it was like, oh, okay, yeah, you're probably right. And then just never did anything with it. But the Airbnb folks have done pretty well for themselves by pursuing it.
Oh, I had a fabulous idea also. I am very small, so I get cold all the time. I live in New England. And I had this idea to create a coat that would, from the outside, look just like a wool fancy fashion coat, and on the inside have heaters so that you are always warm. Never did anything with it.
Mm-hmm. Did somebody else?
Apparently, it seems that it's starting. So there are now coats you can buy with heaters on the outside that don't look up to my standards, but it's just a matter of time at this point.
Understood. Yes. Well, so then you make the argument that creativity is more about decision making than self-expression. Can you expand on this?
Oh, I think it's about both. So creativity is about self-expression. In some ways that creativity happens. So in the arts, there's lots of self-expression. In the example I shared before with developing a new workflow, it's not really about self-expression, it's about solving a problem. And in other domains of creative work, it may be about something different. But throughout, no matter what is the psychological process by which something is done, the constant is this making of choices. So at any given point, you are facing a choice whether you will do something that is more commonplace, similar to something you have done before, or something that will be different, but still can work in some important ways, still effective for whatever you are after. And there are many choices along the way. Like I'm a scientist, there are choices of what research question you're going to ask, how you're going to ask it, what kinds of measures you are going to use in addressing it, in asking the question, how you will set up your studies. Will it be an experiment? Will you go into observing something that happens in the real world outside the laboratory? So these are all choices that have consequences for what you end up doing.
Understood. And I'm curious then, since you and I have both had ideas we have not pursued, what are your pro tips for wise decision making amongst our ideas in terms of what are the best practices or processes by which we discern whether to go ahead and go after something versus just let it lie?
Well, it is really hard to get going. It is hard to get going. There are lots of uncertainties in this process. There's an uncertainty of what psychologists call intellectual risk, a risk whether you can make it happen, whether you have what it takes to develop your idea and to build it. And then there are social reputational risks. What are other people going to say? And in the example that you have mentioned with you invented Airbnb, you actually went to somebody and that somebody told you all the reasons why it couldn't be. And so these are the risks, social risks of embarking on something. And they can stop you in the tracks. Well, what do you do for that not to happen? Well, maybe you could have talked to more people and maybe different kinds of people. That is not just somebody who is an executive in Hyatt and who has a self-interest in business as usual, but maybe some other kinds of perspectives, right?
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Was he
Oh,
torpedoing our idea on purpose? I think he's a pal. I think it came from the heart. But you're right. Why not say, oh, that's a great point. Liability. Let's also talk to some people in insurance to hear if that's the kind of thing that there is insurable against and how that even works. Because it's not like a home or auto or life policy that I know about. It's a whole other thing. And then I could get educated there.
yeah, exactly. And there are actually things like Airbnb in different parts of the world existed in some shape or form before. So you could learn from experiences there. I grew up in Croatia, and there's a great tradition of renting rooms in houses, in private houses. Didn't exist here in the US, but maybe you can learn from other perspectives and from other ways of doing it. So that is one big barrier. Another big barrier is we don't feel confident. We don't feel that we can picture 10 steps ahead. And this feeling of I don't have the self-confidence for it can be in our way. But when we say that, we are making this assumption. We are making an assumption that you have to be 100% confident to try anything out. Well, If we take an analogy with fuel, confidence being fuel of getting you started and getting you going, well, you only need enough fuel to go for a few miles until that first little task along the way. And then you refuel. You refuel by realizing, well, I was able to do something. Therefore, chances are I can do another task along the way, breaking one big thing into smaller chunks.
Okay, so little steps, one bit at a time, gathering input from other sources, seeing what's next, not getting overwhelmed. I like that. I also want to hear your perspective on putting more of an emphasis on problem finding as opposed to problem solving. How do you think about that?
If we want to say it in like one sentence, problem finding is the way to problem solving. When psychologists called this process that happens in creative work problem finding, they made our communication a little bit more difficult because it suggests that, okay, you find a problem and then you solve it kind of step by step. They didn't really mean that. They mean problem finding is a process of exploration. You identify a big umbrella problem, and then you are approaching with curiosity and experimentation what it could be under that big umbrella thing. And you are asking the question in different ways in the process. You are arranging it and rearranging it in different ways. If you are designing a website, you try it one way and then you move different things around so you can see it visually as moving pieces. Sometimes it's physically moving pieces in different places. Like in studies, we sometimes arrange it so that people can physically manipulate objects versus they cannot physically manipulate objects in the process of design. And if you cannot physically manipulate objects, well, you are going to be less successful in it in the end.
Very good. Can you give us some more examples of that in practice?
Oh, so to give you an example from a research study, one of my favorite research studies of all time, actually, it was a study of art students. And researchers invited them into the lab and said, your task is to make a drawing of a still life. And they gave them lots of different objects. There were more than 30 objects on a big table. They could choose whatever they wanted. And then researchers observed what these art students were doing. And they found out that those who were judged to have produced the most original, most creative drawings in the end did not just take a bunch of objects, arrange them, and then spend a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of detail into the minutiae of creating the drawing itself. Rather, what they did is they played with the objects. They would physically lift them up, feel them, weigh them, compare them. If they had mechanical parts, play the mechanical parts. Think of why are they playing the mechanical parts? They're never going to be seen on the 2D drawing, right? You're not going to see what this toy is capable of doing or how it moves. But if you did that anyway, it ended up being more creative in the end. You're getting more feel of what the objects are, what their potential is, what it could suggest. And if you didn't try just one possible arrangement of objects, but try different ones, sketched a little bit, came back and rearranged them, your end product is more creative.
Yeah, that really resonates. And I'm thinking about how that can work even in a more abstract sense. Like if I'm working on a thing, I'm thinking about a thing over time, and then I'm just exposed to more stimuli, just things, environments, ideas, perspectives. It's like they just collide. And it's really, really handy and beautiful in terms of what can someone use to lean on when their ankle is sprained. He's like, well, lots of things. It doesn't have to be a cane per se. It could be a baseball bat. It could be a wood flooring sample. It can be a broom. And so it's interesting, as these ideas did not even occur to me until I actually had that problem in mind and then bumped into those objects in the environment.
Yeah, that's a great example in everyday life. There are examples in the world of work. There was a study that analyzed 1.2 million companies in the United States, big database with lots of information about companies. And they wanted to see, out of those 1.2 million, what will happen to startups, depending on what point they scale up and whether they engage in this problem finding, this construction and reconstruction of what you are actually doing. And they found that those companies, those startups that scale after 2 years, as opposed to in the first 6 months or 12 months after being founded, are 20 to 40% more likely to survive. That is a huge difference. That is a huge effect. And the reason for that was that they engaged in lots of testing of their ideas, seeing how it worked, going back to the drawing board, and not scaling until they figured it out a little bit more.
Okay, very good. I'd also love to hear a little bit about the emotional groove, if you will, because sometimes I feel like I'm in a spot where ideas are just flying left and right, quick, quick, quick. And other times I am just bone dry, got nothing. What's behind this? And is there a way we can kick ourselves into high creative gear?
Yes, there is. What you are describing there is the fact that how we are feeling influences how we are thinking. And the good news is that we can use those connections to our advantage. So, what you noticed is that there are times when ideas are flowing and flowing and flowing, and you are feeling positive and you are feeling energized. And when you are in these kinds of moods, you can very quickly come up with ideas. But at other times, ideas are not coming and everything seems stupid, right? Well, it turns out that those kinds of feelings are also useful. They're just not useful for coming up with ideas. They are very useful for critical thinking. And if we take creative work as not just coming up with ideas, but also developing them, making them into best products we possibly can, then you see how this could be helpful. So you are feeling happy, energized, and upbeat. You come up with lots of ideas. At a different time, you are feeling down, you are feeling gloomy, you're feeling maybe grumpy. You can very much successfully evaluate those ideas, find all the problems potentially with them, and then problem solve around those problems.
Mm-hmm.
We need both.
That's cool. Yeah, so the grumpiness is just like, oh, I'm out of luck. There's no value in this grumpiness. But
Nope.
no, perfection. Critique away now. You're in the groove for that.
Exactly. And you can use it to your advantage. So, for instance, I am not a morning person. People know to stay away from me in the morning. And so I use that to my advantage. In the morning, I can really tear apart things that I have written before. I can find all the things that are not clear, all the things that are flat, that fall not quite just right. And I can mark them. I can solve problems around them. And that is something that you need in creative work too.
So that's a great perspective there, is match the work you're doing to the mood you find yourself in. That's really cool. And I'm also curious, is it possible to make the shift? I am in the grumpy mode, but what is needed from me in the moment is creative, generative mode. Do you have any tips or tricks to manage our own emotional states to find that groove?
Yeah, the good news is that we have more agency in relation to our moods than we seem to, and then we oftentimes believe we do. And a very powerful tool there is how we think about the situation. We assume that situation, emotional reaction, one comes immediately after another. But there's something that happens in between, actually. And what happens in between is how we think about the situation. And if we think about the situation as a threat, it's something that is one way or another dangerous to us or can put us at a risk, then we are going to have less control over it and it will be experienced in a more negative and unpleasant way. But if we shift how we look at the situation and say, hey, right now I'm about to give an important presentation, but I'm feeling nervous. If I'm really being truly honest, I am feeling anxious right now. But if you say to yourself, hey, yes, you are feeling anxious. However, you are feeling anxious not because you are not prepared, not because you are not ready for this, but because you truly and deeply care about it. This is important to you. You are going to do better.
Okay. Understood. So the interpretation, the meaning, that the frame we're putting on it makes a world of difference. I suppose at times it's perhaps easier said than done to choose an empowering, useful, effective frame. Any pro tips in the heat of battle?
Yeah, you're right. Sometimes we just cannot make that happen. And at those times, an emotion can already happen. We are already experiencing something unpleasant and something that seems to be getting in our way. Sometimes the only thing we can do at those instances is to choose how we react. So, what our physical reaction is going to be like? That can be influencing the activation in our body by taking a deep breath, by taking just one moment before we react. I give a lot of talks, and sometimes you get unexpected questions. And when you get unexpected questions, you can feel your body getting jittery. So you take a step back and take a breath. Taking a breath can make you seem thoughtful to the audience, but it's also going to calm your physical reactions. And as your physical reactions calm, your emotional ones do too.
All right. Thank you. I also want to hear your take on creativity and AI. What are the best ways to engage with it and the worst ways to engage with it as we do creative stuff?
Oh, the worst ways. The worst ways are the easiest. The worst ways is you ask ChatGPT or whatever is your AI of choice a question, you copy paste that answer, and you are done. And
Okay.
you are laughing at it, but you are laughing at it because you wouldn't do it like that.
Well, those who have, I'm thinking about some attorneys and others have faced severe consequences of the negative
Exactly.
variety.
So it is a chuckle for us here in the conversation because we wouldn't do it, but people are doing it. So that's clearly the worst case scenario. What are better ways of using AI is a little bit of a sparring partner. I oftentimes use AI when I'm writing, and I don't necessarily use anything it produces. It is more of asking a question: how could this chunk of text be said in a different way, be expressed in a different way? And I have heard stories from writers who are using it in a similar way, never actually taking the output itself, but having it as inspiration, as a jumping point, as, oh, I didn't think of it to put it that way. And it could be in opposition to it or in agreement with it as a different perspective. So engaging with AI as a tool, where it could be a conversation partner that has a perspective of having swallowed the internet, can be something to make you think in a different way, make you arrange what you're doing in a different way. You are the one asking the question. Always remember you are the one asking the question, which brings us back to what we talked about earlier of creativity and the importance of problem finding in creativity. You are always the one doing the problem finding when working with the AI agent. It can give you answers, but you are the one asking the questions in a different way, formulating it and reformulating it to find different angles.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that often what AI will produce is the opposite of novel and innovative and kind of the most obvious standard issue. This is what the internet says response on a matter, which can be helpful. It's like, oops, I overlooked that. And also it gives you what I find is my experience is like a lot of great reminders, like, oh, of course, I should have thought of that. And because you mentioned that, this makes me think of this other thing. So a sparring partner is a great way to put it.
Yeah. And makes me think of this other thing is really interesting. Sometimes we do that with other humans. It's just that this AI is readily available at any time and it has the knowledge of the whole internet. So it can be useful in that way, even if it is to point to you the usual commonplace ways of looking at something.
Yeah, very good.
And the usual and commonplace is not creative, but usual and commonplace can be a starting point from which you make something creative.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Well, Zorana, tell me any other top things you want to make sure to mention before we hear about some of your favorite things?
The one that I want to mention is how do we make creativity reliable? How do we ensure that we are not a one-hit wonder? And in the context of your job, that you are sustainably and reliably and sometimes on demand doing creative things.
Mm-hmm. Tell us.
Well, the secret is it's not secret. The key is in the social nature of creativity. When we are creating, when we are doing something, even if the act itself is solitary, like writing a book, I was the only one writing it, but there are social influences on it. They are the voices of colleagues who you interacted with and from whom you have learned. They are those lessons from having read, in my case, journal articles and books that influenced your thinking that became part of what you write and what you do. And then there are those social influences that create an infrastructure or an ecosystem of the job. And when that climate, that job climate is one that is favorable to creativity and innovation, then it can really flourish and not just once, but sustainably.
Big thanks to Zorana for sharing her wisdom with us. And big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsored checkout is strawberry.me career coaching. Having real clarity and direction can make or break your career. If it seems like you're putting in the work but not seeing your career take off, some coaching might be just the ticket. Strawberry.me matches you with certified career coaches who help you gain clarity on what you really want next in your career, develop a results-driven strategy, and stay accountable. And they can also help you flourish beyond career issues. I had a fantastic session with my coach, Brett, about handling stress from so many responsibilities in so many areas. He was fun. He was wise. He just really got me. We had some laughs and a good time and a good rapport. And he gave me an exercise that has been so quick and so effective for me. I've been doing it every day. So if you're ready to take control and build momentum in your career, go to strawberry.me/awesome to claim your $50 credit. That's strawberry.me/awesome. Because awesome careers don't just happen, you make them happen. All right. Well, now could you share with us a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
It is by Frank Barron, creativity researchers from the 1950s and 60s. And he said that creative individuals are occasionally crazier, yet adamantly saner than the average person.
Mm-hmm. And could you share a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
One study that I find very intriguing is a study where people have looked at the influence of instructions on creative thinking. So there was a standard test of creative thinking, but one group of people was given the standard instruction, come up with as many ideas as you can. And the other group, that same instruction plus 3 words, please be creative. And those 3 words made a bunch of difference. When we ask people to be creative, they rise to the occasion.
Okay. And a favorite book?
My favorite book on creativity, since we are at the topic, is a very old one. I like to uncover things that are sometimes forgotten. And it is from 1975 by Rollo May. And the title is The Courage to Create.
All right. And a favorite habit?
Make it a habit to learn what works for you. So to learn that, yes, all the advice out there says write first thing in the morning, but if it doesn't work for you, don't do it that way. Create your own way that works for you, depending on who you are as a person.
All right. And is there a particular nugget, a soundbite, a Zorana original that you're really known for?
Creativity is social even when it doesn't feel like it is.
Okay. And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where would you point them?
Well, my website is Zorana Ivcevic Pringle with dashes in between. And that is the best way to find how to reach me, all the information on what I'm doing and how to stay in touch.
All right. And do you have a final challenge or call to action for someone looking to be awesome at their job?
Look around you. If you have a point of frustration, it is telling you that something could be done differently and that it is ripe for problem solving.
All right. Zorana, thank you.
Thank you.
I really appreciated Zorana's perspective about how the foul mood can be a useful one, as opposed to just having sort of a meta mood about your mood. Like, I feel bad and I can't do anything because I feel bad. This sucks. I feel bad. Oh, so now would be a great opportunity to critique. Let's begin the criticisms. Good stuff from Zorana. If you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we've referenced, please drop on by awesomeatyourjob.com/EP1058. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.
Find yourself looking for a new job or change in career? Monster.com is here to help. We are not only here to bring you job postings, but also AI interview prep and salary tools, expert career advice, and top-notch resume services. We've got everything you need to land your perfect job fit. Discover the magic of finding the ideal job with Monster.com. Your future starts now. Visit Monster.com today. Your next job opportunity is just a click away.